Serving in the military oftentimes transforms, in an amazing sense, the ability for any of us to be rather untrusting, critical, hating people in general. Once we are indoctrinated into the military culture, well, let's just say that it oftentimes, and this is my observation, having served in the military for 20 plus years, that we suddenly put on our blinders. We want to believe in everybody who comes to work with us. And there were a few times where we're sorely disappointed. And that's what I'm going to talk about on today's episode. Huzzah, and welcome to DD214, the podcast for people leaving the military. I'm your host and retired veteran, Eric. The mission of the DD214 podcast is to create a space for transitioning service members and veterans. Today's show is sponsored by my wife, Wendy, and her web design business, Coop Creative Consulting. Wendy designs bespoke websites to get your business, podcast, or church found online. As an expert with Elementor, Canva, WordPress, and numerous other programs, Wendy will make your website great again. Pure and simple. If you're looking for anything to help you with your business, podcast, or church, go no further than wendycoop.com and book a free good fit call. Now back to the show. So I was thinking about this today, and my wife had to go to a VA appointment, and I had some time to kind of mull over things that had been kind of weighing on my mind. And something I thought about was how we judge character. And as a service member, you've probably been disappointed multiple times because you thought that this person was all that and literally a bag of chips. And only to find out that they were some kind of criminal, some kind of drunk, they had other substance abuse problems, they had other legal troubles, and so on. So I'd like to talk about a couple of those. I guess I'm going to talk about maybe four of them right now. So I'm going to wind it back. 2009, I was in my first department head tour. I was a combat systems officer on a guided missile frigate, FFG 45, USS DeWert. And I had this really basically shit hot guy named Mike McNeil. He was an OS2 at the time, operations specialist, second class. Very smart guy. And then after DeWert in early 2011, I relocated up to Norfolk. I was on USS Kearsarge as a traino, the training officer. Then I went up and I was on USS Constitution, huzzah, as the executive officer. And then I relocated back down to Florida, finally bought a house, finally found where my roots are going to be. All that is good. I was going to USS Iwo Jima to be the navigator, and I did that for a year, and then I fleeted up to become the C5I officer. But when I got down there, and I got down to Florida in mid-June of 2015, and the ship was on deployment. And while I was waiting, I had checked into the Transient Personnel Unit, or TPU, and I was waiting for maybe a couple of weeks to get a phone call, get my airplane ticket, and go out and meet the ship mid-deployment. But during that interlude, I had a chance to meet now Operations Specialist First Class Mike McNeil, and I bought him lunch at Bogey's, which is the restaurant by the golf course on Naval Station Mayport. If you've ever been there, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I bought him lunch, and I told him to bring in his entire service record. I did a review. I wrote a wonderful walk on water level kind of, I guess, profile sheet. And on all those profile sheets, if you really think that somebody needs to be an officer and they need to get into a commissioning program, you put tens all across the board. Otherwise, they're not going to get there. So I did that. At this point, McNeil's a good friend, a good shipmate. We had chased pirates together on the good ship DeWart, and now it's several years later. He's an E6, and he's trying to get a commission, to be an officer. He's got a college degree. He actually had a couple college degrees, if I recall correctly. And I was totally happy. He gave me a coin in exchange for me buying him lunch and reviewing his service record and having a chat with him about what it's like to be an officer in the United States Navy. Well, now let's this is in June of 2015. Now let's fast forward to August of 2017. I had just started teaching. I was about a month and a half into teaching leadership at the United States Naval Academy, my alma mater, in Annapolis, Maryland. And my daughter flew up from Florida. I was geobaching. That's another thing that I will talk about in a future podcast. But I was geographically bacheloring, and my daughter came up to visit me for the Labor Day weekend or something like that. And let's face it, most of us, what's the first thing that we do when we wake up? We check our phones. So I check my phone. I go right onto Facebook, and I see Mike McNeil's mugshot, Channel 4, the local station. Dude was married, had an 8-year-old son, and thought that he was going to pick up a deaf 12-year-old girl from somebody he had met on social media. It was a sting operation. You know how that goes. I mean, you've watched enough Chris Hansen, have a seat, please, kind of shows. Well, he's currently incarcerated at FCI Texarkana, and he'll get released at the earliest in late 2026, maybe early 2027. He's serving a 10-year sentence. And when that happened, it blew me away. I thought this guy was the epitome of everything that America needs in a service member. And I felt a sincere sense of betrayal, disgrace. How could I have not caught this? And when that happens, it sucks. I mean, a lot of you who are listening to this podcast probably have similar experiences. I'd be happy to hear your comments on my YouTube channel, or, or send me an email. But it totally sucked. Now I'm going to go to Exhibit 2. This is a guy, Midshipman Mosby, or Mosley. I think it was Mosley. Again, everything I'm talking about, it's open source. It's been publicized, and it's, if nothing else, just armor or weaponry for the media to go after the military because we can't control our own people. Well, Midshipman Mosley, he was a good guy. He was one of my best students, actually. And very engaged in the conversations, and he wrote good papers, and I gave him good grades and everything. I think, yeah, I passed him with an A. He he uh, he would actually write thought-provoking, engaging kinds of answers to the prompts that we would give them, and by all accounts, he was an all right guy. Except, fast forward a couple years later, now going to a service academy, that's a 4-year commitment. So you start. So he was a freshman. He was a plebe. That's what we call the freshman at the Naval Academy. 2017, 2018 academic year. And in 2020, I'm in Korea and I see him posted all over the media, mainstream media even, and and by that I mean, Skynet, which is the Australian cable news channel that just loves to report on America more than they do on their own country, and the Guardian, the Daily Mail, all, those international publications. I see this guy posted all over the place, and he had kid porn, he had child pornography, he had depictions of outrageous acts being committed to our most defenseless people in this world, our children, on his phone. And then he went UA, which means unauthorized absence, right? He went, or sometimes people call it AWOL, absence without leave. He bailed, finally turned himself in, serving. He I think he's out of jail now because I don't think he had enough or explicit enough child porn to keep him behind bars for the rest of his life. But he got like a 20-month sentence or something. And I was just devastated. I gave this kid good marks. I thought he was legit. And I felt that same sense of betrayal like I felt with Mike McNeil. Just everything that I did to help them out, and they chew it up and spit it out, and they completely, blastedly betray me. And I didn't want to say blastedly. I actually want to say another euphemism or expletive, but I'm going to try to keep this at least PG rated here. But this is another terrible thing. Also, that same the next semester. So that was the first semester. I had Midshipman Mosley. Second semester, I had Midshipman Nixon Kago. Actually, his first name was Kago. His last name was Nixon. But somehow they did a clerical error and he just accepted it. So he switched his first name to his last name and vice versa. And so Midshipman Nixon Kago. This guy was a devil dog. Hoorah! United States Marine Corps. He was a sergeant before he entered into the Naval Academy. Now, I was very impressed with the fact that he was a sergeant, that he had been an E5. And I thought, this guy's amazing. I mean, tell us your stories. Turns out he made E5 by playing soccer for the Marine Corps. Okay, I'm not going to disparage the value of making rank while you're playing in semi-professional sports in the military, but that's how he made E5, was by he probably scored high enough on his ASVAB that he entered in as a corporal, like an E3 or a private first class rather, and he well, he showed up as a sergeant. I thought this guy was great. And again, just like Midshipman Mosley, he was very engaging, had very smart. The guy was 25 already. He had he had value to add to the course discussion. And this is me as a military instructor. I'm basically one step below even being an assistant professor. So this is the closest I've ever been to being a professor. So I'm teaching college level courses, and I've got the brightest and the smartest young men and women in my classroom, and I'm engaging in discussions about leadership. And this kid, Kago, well, he would knock it out of the park. He had things to say. He was kind of a soft-spoken fellow. Seemed like a pretty pleasant guy. I'd see him in passing in the hallway and everything, and a couple of times I brought my wife onto the yard, and my wife's a classmate. We both graduated 2001, so we're walking around. I'm going, hey, Wendy. This is Midshipman Kago. He's really shit hot. He was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. I'm bragging about this. Well, same time that Mosley got rolled up in that child porn thing, there went Midshipman Kago. Now I think he was a second class midshipman second class, a junior of sorts. And it turned out he was going girls into the female rooms because at the Naval Academy anyway. I don't know how the other service academies go, but you keep the doors open when you sleep at night, and then you have people who are standing watch, and they make sure that there's no shenanigans and hanky panky and such going on, right? Anyhow, it turned out this guy was going in multiple times over several months, and nobody fucking reported it. They He was sexually assaulting female midshipmen. Kago today is at Fort Leavenworth. He is serving a 25-year tour of duty. He's been reduced in rank to E1, and when he is finally released, which I guess will be in 2044, 2045 timeframe, he will have a dishonorable discharge and his life is over. Again, a sense of betrayal, a profound sense of betrayal, actually. I just could not believe that that was going on. That a guy that I thought highly of, and he wrote the best papers, just like Mosley. He had the best conversations. He did all the right things. He was engaged in the classroom. I gave him the highest marks. I mean, these are basically 4.0 students, but I don't know what the hell they're doing, after hours. I mean, I would just go home and do whatever I'm doing at home. And well, again, profound sense of grief, profound sense of betrayal. And the last one, I was an executive officer 10 years ago, and we needed somebody in one of the gunnery ratings. So we had a choice between a gunner's mate, second class, and I forget what the rating of the other guy was, but he was also a second class aviation rating, worked on weapons. Maybe he was an AT, I don't know. But the nature of that job was basically special duty. And we screened as far as we could. We screened everybody who applied to come onto our crew, onto our ship. America's ship of state, Old Ironsides, huzzah. Undefeated, 33 victories, lost none. Go up there when you're in Boston. You'll go down to the gun deck, and in the back of the gun deck, towards the stern, you're going to see a fenced or basically a blocked off area, but there's going to be a board, and you're going to see that board, and it's got the list of first lieutenants. You're going to see my name, Eric A. Coop, February 2015, May, or February 2013, May to 2015. Anyway, we had a position that we needed to fill because a fellow who had that position on the ship was going to permanent change of station, PCS, to another command, go back operational and everything. This is considered shore duty. And we looked at the two, we narrowed it down to two candidates. And We looked at one, the aviation rating, aviation gunner's mate, I think, and his entire Facebook profile was nothing but bottles of liquor. We're going, well, that doesn't send us a good signal. That doesn't give us a warm and fuzzy. We look at the GM2, and the GM2, all of his shots are action. He was SWIC, which is like Spec Ops boat crew, action shots of him firing um, M240s and 50 cals and things like that, and throwing grenades. I mean, nothing but action shots. And in hindsight, we probably would have been better to get the aviation rating because I don't know whatever happened with his career. I forgot his name. It's been lost to history. But this GM2, we thought he was the stone cold, sober, hardcore, motivated warrior, an exemplar. And both of these guys in the pictures were handsome fellows and decent height and everything. We did have at the time some things like if you had excessive acne, you would not be considered for the crew. If you had too many tattoos, you better explain why, and so forth and so on. But we get this GM2, gunner's mate second class, shows up, highly motivated, highly professional in the workplace. The dude was a lush. He kept getting into alcohol problems. We actually sent him down to a facility in Connecticut so he could dry out for a month. He came back and he relapsed. And at least in the Navy, you get one chance to sober up and get on straight and narrow. And if you have another issue with alcohol, then you are considered treatment failure. And we have no choice. Our hands are tied. We got to kick you out of the Navy. That's what happened. Again, I don't have any malignment with this gunner's mate second class. He was a great asset to the team. It's just a complete pity that he could not keep it together when he was not at the command. He was having some marital issues and things like that, and we've all been there. A lot of us self-medicate. That happens, but if you can't keep it together, there's only so much that we can actually do for you. I mean, at the end of the day, being in the military is not a charitable endeavor. We're not giving people jobs just so they can be working. We have fitness requirements. We got weight requirements, height requirements, professional requirements, criminal background checks. If you want to get a clearance, you get a whole different level of scrutiny on your character, and people show up at your next door neighbor's house asking questions about how much you drink and what kinds of things you say, and they're developing. So anyhow, at the end of the day, I got it right. I would say maybe 99% of the time. And that 1% of the time was four individuals who sorely disappointed me, and it made me question my ability to be a judgment of character because character is in the eye of the beholder, really. I mean, if I don't know how I could hire a guy. If I'm an employer and I hire a guy and I don't know that he's a serial killer, I don't know if I'm hiring the next Ted Bundy or John Wayne Gacy. They might come off as the best worker, motivated, dedicated. I'm going to promote this guy as soon as the next guy moves out. I'm moving him right up, kind of thing. And then it all hits the fan, and then you're going, what in the world was I thinking when I hired this guy? What was I thinking with Midshipman Mosley when I gave him A's on all of his papers and he passed all his tests and he was dedicated, motivated, awesome dude, right? But he had this thing for kid porn or the nighttime sexual assaulter Kago He was the same mold, same class year. They were all going to graduate in the class of 2021. Dedicated, motivated, straight A's, a guy I lean on in my conversations. Maybe I had a little bit of a bias because I was impressed with his career to date and the rank that he held in the Marine Corps before he joined the Naval Academy. And these guys went to prison for the stuff that they did, or Lieutenant Junior Grade Mike McNeil, and he was a Lieutenant Junior Grade when he got rolled up uh, in the sting operation, Chris Hansen style. Going, what in the world are you thinking? Why did you do this? And it's those kinds of things. You know, I and the poor GM2, and he never had anything criminal on him, and his name's not an open source, so I'm going to withhold his identity. But GM2, great guy. I thought he was awesome. I thought he was exactly what we needed at the command. My captain thought he was exactly what we needed at the command. My command senior chief thought he was exactly what we needed, and we were sorely disappointed. So I'm just going to leave that there. You think when you're in the military, I think maybe we get conditioned to perhaps give prospective employees the benefit of the doubt. And then sometimes we fall flat. We had no way of knowing. It's not an indictment on us, but it's still, at least for me, it made me question what kinds of processes I was using to evaluate potential people or to evaluate people I was serving with. And I'll admit I cried a little bit on each of these ones. It was devastating. I thought the world of these people. They were amazing people. And then I find, or as a dude said, this shit has come to light, or new shit has come to light. And and then I don't know what to think at that point. I'm going, am I flawed? Why do I keep getting all these bad apples in my barrel? What am I doing wrong? I don't know. But having several years to simmer about that, I don't think it was a problem with me. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because you may go through this or you may have gone through this. And if so, feel free to elaborate. Give me in a non attributional manner kind of the 50,000 level view of what happened. Let me know. I know I'm not the only one. And I shared that with several of my friends. And in the case of Mike McNeil, me and a guy named Jim, we were, he was the operations officer, I was the combat systems officer on DeWert, and we both gave him glowing recommendations. We helped him get his commission. He went to OCS, 90 Day Wonder, and then he gets wrapped up in this thing. And I shouldn't even say wrapped up because that would imply that he was goaded or entrapped. That was not the case. He was actively trying to commit sexual activity with a 12-year-old. And he's right where he needs to be right now at FCI Texarkana. You can look him up, Michael McNeil. Look him up. Um, but either way, when you find out that somebody misled you, somebody turned out to not be what you thought they were, it stings, it hurts, and it should make you question how your internal rubric of sorts is judging the character or potential or other things, other characteristics, positive, negative, or otherwise, about people. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Well, anyhow, thank you for tuning into this episode. And be sure to follow the show on my website, the dd214podcast.com, in your favorite podcast app so you know every time that there's a new episode. Also, follow me on my YouTube channel at Eric Coop, ERICCOOP, and be sure to share this episode with your fellow service members and veterans as well. Again, I'm Eric, and this is the DD214 podcast. Until next time, huzzah, shipmates.